evening. Tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of the Sunday school movement. The Sunday school movement still has influences churches today. When I grew up, we went every Sunday to Sunday school. There was a set curriculum and activities. My parents went when they grew up in Minnesota in the 50s and 60s, and some of my grandparents also went in Minnesota in the 40s, or in the 50s and 60s, or in the 30s and 40s, excuse me. I also had friends in other denominations that went to Sunday school, so it wasn't just a Baptist or a Lutheran thing. It was many mainline Protestant denominations that had Sunday schools. They became a religious, educational institution and safe haven for children. Many times children were picked up in the neighborhood by buses or other people volunteering to take them. And as children, you could invite your friends to Sunday school knowing that they would probably hear something about the Bible or something that would be beneficial to them. The beginning of the Sunday school movement started in the mid-18th century in England. Robert Raikes and Thomas Stock were first recognized as the originators, even though there had been some Sunday schools that had started already. In 1790, they established the first Sunday school. It was originally for poor and orphan children. In the United States, the American Sunday School Union was founded in 1824, and in their earliest constitution, it says their purpose was to concentrate the efforts of Sabbath school societies in different regions of our country, to strengthen the hands of the friends of pious instruction on the Lord's Day, to disseminate useful information, circulate moral and religious publications in every part of the land, and so endeavor to plant a Sunday school wherever there's a population. And they did that pretty well. Sunday schools were all over. They consisted of teaching discipline and basic educational skills to these kids. It was organized to give discipline to the working class children. These were kids who worked in the mines and worked in like the sewing factories during the time of Charles Dickens, which he talks about a lot of the social injustices. These were those kids. They were sometimes held in the evening, and they were taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and catechism, which is the doctrines of the faith. They first started out going 1 hour a week, and eventually they were expected 4 to 5 hours per week. It was often the only schooling that they received because they worked all throughout the day. And sometimes these children were hesitant. They didn't feel like they were good enough to go, and they were ashamed of their clothing and their hygiene, and these guys who started the school said, all we want is a smile from you. Eventually, Sunday schools were standardized, and they were effective for children and eventually spread throughout the world. They were simple. They wasn't anything complicated, but they were biblically based. They gave children something to do. The parents of these kids were able to elevate their families socially. So for these families whose children worked in the mines or in the sewing factories, most likely their parents did too. And so their parents were poor, and a lot of these families were moving from rural communities to urban communities. And so for them to move up socially was a big deal to them. Many times it was education for the adults. They could attend the schools, or their children brought these lessons home and the books home with them, and therefore taught their parents. Sunday schools influenced state education through lessons and their examples. So all of the standardization that you see in the states today were pretty much based on the Sunday school movement. Standardization became part of the Sunday school curriculum. It became more organized and added different courses as it developed. Some of these workers wanted additional standardization because they were worried that they were inferior to public schools, and they felt that their Sunday schools promoted important biblically based information. One example is actually of a professor at Drake from Des Moines, and he was the professor of religious education, and he suggested a standardization called the 10-point standard. And there had already been a standardization in place, but it wasn't anything like the public schools, and so he felt like there needed to be something a little more set in stone, especially for the teachers. And it was eventually used in Des Moines in 1913 for a few years, and his 10 points were relation to the church, so the church controlled and was financially responsible for the lessons. Adequate building and equipment, so they had blackboards, maps, separated classrooms. Correlation of educational agencies, so there were graded activities and instructions just like there would be in regular schools. Graded curriculum and graded worship, so this was Christian knowledge. Graded organization, so different age groups for different classes. Training for the Sunday school leadership, so teachers had to attend training classes and conference meetings. There were special instruction and activities. including evangelistic, missionary, and temperance instructions, because back then refraining from alcohol was a big deal. The element of time, so there were set times for worship and study, and this would instill church going in younger people. Benevolences, they gave to state and national Sunday school boards, home and foreign missions, and local funds. And then they were affiliated with 3 groups: the Religious Education Association, the International Sunday School Association, and the American Sunday School Union. So he wanted it to be pretty set in stone what these Sunday school classes did. And he also wrote, whatever may be accomplished by other agencies, the Sunday school continues to be next to the home the most important religious and moral influence for children. Teachers need to be chosen and trained so that Sunday school education shall not be isolated from and inferior to general education. The subject matter and arrangement of courses of study need to be adapted to the successive stages of child development. The methods of instruction need to be in accordance with the best principles of psychology and pedagogy, and the general conduct of the schools needs to be perfected. So the people who were in charge of schools and Sunday schools back then, it was a big deal to them. They didn't have a lot of other places where kids would get biblical instruction, especially people who didn't grow up in Christian homes. So that's why this guy was so set on standardizing it. There has been a decline. More churches are dissolving the program, and I've noticed that even around this area. The church I go to doesn't have Sunday school anymore. It just has small groups and church service, and they have small church for little kids, but they don't have a set Sunday school class anymore. Even the church I grew up with doesn't have set Sunday school classes anymore, and I think part of it is with the growth of small groups, and it allows more flexible time and location for meetings. So instead of being at church for the church service in the morning and Sunday school, and then a lot of times coming back Sunday night, it gives that group more flexibility. They can meet on a Tuesday night at someone's house instead of being in one place all day on Sunday. One guy who wrote, as part of the group who made this slide, he said there's a 61% decline in young people participating in one of our formation ministries. So he, along with the guys back in the 1800s, felt like it was really important, this foundation class, and it's declining, it's going away. You can see on this slide, the blue is Sunday school pupils, and then the red is Vacation Bible School, and you can see both groups have declined, but Sunday school has drastically declined even from the 1990s, because that's the first part of 1990 all the way to 2013. So, in conclusion, the Sunday school movement is important. It affects how we run a lot of our programs in our churches today. Even though we don't necessarily have Sunday schools anymore, we still have set standards and curriculum and activities that is based on the Sunday school movement. It was influential in teaching basic skills to the working class. It was effective with children. It made a difference in their lives, but there has been a decline in the numbers and the attendance. Thank you for listening to my presentation.